Hey guys, what is up? Jeremy here, and y'all, today I'm going to talk about another topic that I hear some different misinformation about from time to time, and y'all, that is carb cycling. Y'all, carb cycling is another one of those diet crazes, those nutritional manipulation things. Y'all, it has some huge benefits, but at the same time, there's a lot of people who put out the ideas with carb cycling, and listen, a lot of their ideas are right, but then they're having these other things or these other ideas that can create some problems. So y'all, I'm going to try to clear up some of that, give you the basics of what carb cycling is, and then some basic things to help you be more successful and to be able to meet your goals using carb cycling. Y'all, before we begin, hey, do me a real big favor. Y'all hit that like button, subscribe down below. Y'all, it helps our account out and our page out so much for you to just take a quick moment. Y'all, we are so grateful for you just hitting that like button. Y'all, it makes a huge difference. That being said, y'all, let's get started talking about carb cycling. Now, y'all, first of all, the basics of what carb cycling is, y'all, it's just a method of nutritional manipulation. Y'all, we're just trying to manipulate the carbs that we consume each day to be able to create a deficit. Listen, we know that carbohydrates anatomically, scientifically, y'all, they store, if you're taking in too many carbs, y'all, they store up as body fat. Y'all, it goes to glycogen in the muscles, and if you're consuming too many and you're not burning through those carbs, or you're eating too many quick burning carbs like sugary things or starchy things, a lot of times your body will start to store those up, and those go as stored body fat. Now, the purpose of carb cycling is to get you to be able to tap in to your existing stored body fat. Y'all, we know that actually fats are one of the body's preferred methods of energy, and so carb cycling in its most basic elementary form is to basically be changing the amount of carbs you're consuming between a few days of the week, manipulating them throughout the course of an entire week or day after day to be able to get your body to better tap into your stored body fat. It's almost like we're creating a calorie deficit, but instead of necessarily worried strictly about calories, we're worried about carbs as well. We still, listen, you can't sit there and carb cycle and say, I'm going to consume 4,000 calories a day. Oh, but I'm going to carb cycle and I'm only going to get 100 grams of carbs a day. It's not going to work. It just doesn't have any factual basis that you're going to do that. Carbs make up a huge portion of many people's diets, but we want to be able to manipulate them in a way so that our bodies can be able to tap into that stored body fat. So y'all, that's the basics of what carb cycling actually is. Now y'all, I see a lot of different kind of misinformation about how carb cycling is used. Y'all, I see people who start to track their macros. When you're tracking your macros, that is a fantastic way. If you're already tracking your macros or you're starting to do that, that's a fantastic way to go ahead and incorporate carb cycling in, because by tracking your macros, you're tracking fats, carbs, and protein. So you're already making sure you're only consuming X number of each of the macronutrients per day. So as you can kind of figure out, it makes sense that this is a great time. It's a great method for starting carb cycling. Now, a lot of people will do carb cycling where they'll have a higher carb day. Let's just use an example. Say your carbs, if you're tracking your macros, let's say you're a guy, you're 200 pounds, you're super active, working out 2 or 3 hours a day, 6 days a week. You have a job where you're moving around all day on your feet and everything. You're not sedentary, sitting behind a desk or behind your laptop all day. And so you pull up any number of macro calculators that are out there, and it tells you need about 390 grams of carbs a day based on your activity level, your work schedule, and your work demands. Well, a lot of people, when they're starting the carb cycle, they'll sit there and say, okay, that's going to be my higher carb day, eating my 390 grams of carbs. And that's a good place to start. That's your normal carb intake day. But then they'll do things like, okay, so I'm going to do low carb, I'm going to do a day of higher carb, and then I'm going to do 3 days of low carb. And my 3 days of low carb are going to be 60 grams of carbs a day. And it's this dramatic difference. It's a huge difference of those, high carb day and low carb day. It's night and day. That's not going to set you up for as much success. Also people kind of, when they're tracking macros, they kind of go, a lot of people with the whole, if it fits your macros thing. And so they're like, okay, I'm eating high carbs today. This is my cheat day. This is my cheat meal. I'm going to go eat 3 pizzas or 45 pancakes or whatever. You still need, even in those moments that you're eating your higher carb days, you still got to eat the right foods. You can't let it go off the rails. And in the same way, if you're eating low carb on your low carb days, you still cannot sacrifice the food quality. So here's a few tips. We have the basic idea of what carb cycling is. Here's a few tips to help you succeed. Number one, like I was just talking about, making sure that whether it's a high carb day or one of your lower carb days, make sure the carbohydrates you're eating are super nutrient dense. You're getting the things that you need from them. Don't sit there and go chow down like, oh, I get 70 carbs today, or I get 100 carbs today on my low carb day. I'm going to go eat, half a bag of Oreos because that's going to get me to 65 carbs. Then I can have another 35 from something else. That's bad meal planning. That's your performance in the gym, your physique that you're trying to build. That's all going to suffer. Make sure you're eating good quality whole foods that are going to fuel you in the gym, because you're going to hit a point when you're doing these workouts that if you're doing 2 or 3 or 4 days even of low carbs, that 3rd and 4th day might be really tough, because now your body's tapping into stored body fat. You're not getting those glycogen bumps and everything, whether it's before your workout or after your workout. And so in turn, your body's going to be kind of, especially the first maybe 2 or 3 weeks you start carb cycling, it's going to be a little tougher. It's going to be a little bit of a shock to you. And your workouts may feel a little lethargic. They may feel a little bit tougher to go through. So that's number one. Number two, manage your carb days on your low carb days effectively. And I mean this in a couple of different ways. One of the things, like I said earlier, is that a lot of people will do, let's use that same example of 390 carbs. That's your normal carb intake if you're just tracking your macros based on your activity level. And all of a sudden someone's like, okay, my low carb day is going to be 60 carbs. Well, let's think about this in a smarter way. Eventually you may be making huge progress. And your body may be changing, you may be getting stronger, you may be getting leaner if that's your goal. All those are fantastic. But eventually, like everybody else who's dieting, whether it's for some kind of competition and you're trying to get leaner for it, whether it's bodybuilding, CrossFit, whatever, if you're doing any kind of carb cycling, whether you're just trying to get ready for the beach for the summer, if you're carb cycling long enough, your body's going to start getting used to that, getting towards some form of homeostasis with it, and you're going to stop making the same progress. But if you've already in the very, very beginning said, my low carb days are going to be 60 grams of carbs a day, you can't adjust anything. Instead, it's going to be much, much more advantageous to start out saying, okay, my high carb days are going to be 390 grams of carbs. And I'm going to start out with my low carb days being 150, 170 grams of carbs. We can also stagger them, which I'll talk about in a second. But I'm going to start out with like 175 grams of carbs maybe. And that's going to be a dramatic drop. And I'm going to be doing 1 high carb day and 3 low carb days in a row before I do another high carb day. And if you're sitting there dropping 150, 170 carbs lower or more, 200 grams of carbs down from 390, 170, 180, 190. Y'all, you're 200 grams lower for your low carb days. Y'all, if that's what you're doing, y'all, your body is going to be getting the shock of carb cycling. Your body, especially if you're that active, putting in 2 or 3 hours working out, you're on your feet working all day, you're super active doing other things, your body is going to be burning through that. You're still going to be tapping into stored body fat. But the difference is, when it comes down to it, if you start to see you're seeing great results after a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, but then you hit week 5 or week 6 and all of a sudden that plateau starts. Now all of a sudden you can say, okay, I've been doing 170 grams of carbs. I'm going to drop that down to 130. I'm going to bring it down to 130. You do that for 3 or 4 weeks. Maybe you start to stagnate a little again. Now you can drop that down to maybe 100 or 90. You have room from there that you can progress this thing, that you can drop your carbs in a progressive status so that you can, over time, continue to make gains, continue to see results. If you think about a lot of bodybuilders when they're starting to get ready for a show, a lot of bodybuilders, used to be bodybuilders would start getting ready 12 weeks out for a show. You hear bodybuilders or physique athletes talking about, I'm 12 weeks out, I got to start dieting. Now, a lot of bodybuilders will start 20 weeks out from a show. And they'll start the first 2 or 3 weeks, literally they're not doing anything different other than they put some cardio in and they start to make sure their diet's super clean. Then after 2 weeks, then they start to drop the carbs down a little because they've already gotten a little bit of shock because they're not eating any junk. They're eating super clean foods. Then they start to manipulate the carbs. That's the same thing we're doing. Number 3 is to stagger your carbs when you're carb cycling. You absolutely need to have a higher carb day depending on what you have going on. Maybe you're doing a CrossFit competition. Maybe you're doing carb cycling to get leaned out because you want to do a triathlon, and so you're using this as a way to drop some extra body fat to help make the whole thing easier. But if you sit there and you're getting ready and you're a day or 2 days out, you might want to have a little bit higher carb day. Get some extra carbs and your body's going to need it. But on a normal basis, whenever I've had clients, and I've had clients who've had super amounts of success doing carb cycling, whenever I've had them do it, they'll start day 1, it's their normal high carb day. Let's say we're using the same example, 390 calories. Day 2, we would be on like a 5-day rotation. Day 1's 390. Day 2, we drop down to about 225. We've already created like 170, 150, 170 gram carb deficit right there. Day 3, we drop down to about 170, 180. We've still taken it down 50 grams. Day 4, we'd be down towards about 130. Day 5, we'd be down about 100 or 90, depending on the person, how they're feeling and how they're doing with it, maybe 85 grams of carbs. And then day 6, we'd start back over with the high carb day. And we just go through a rotation. And we'd progressively over day 2, 3, 4, and 5 drop down. We'd have our high carb day, our 4 low carb days. And listen, if you want to do only 3, you can do the same thing and only do 3 staggering lower carb days. But you're dropping down a little each time. And you do that. And when the same thing, you start to see a little bit of a plateau, you can bring your carbs down for each of your stages. But each of those stages, you're going to be tapping into that stored body fat already. And in each of those stages, we're going to be getting a little bit more and a little bit more of that deficit before we get back to our high carb day. It's a super great way especially to start carb cycling because it's not as much of a shock as going from 390 to, hey, I'm going to drop all the way down to 200 and I'm going to do this for the next 3 or 4 days. That's more of a shock than going, 390, 275, 190, then down to 130 maybe. And then if you do a 4th day in a row, down right around 100. It's not as much of a shock on your body, because you're getting 2 days that would still be kind of above that, but you're in that deficit. Y'all, the fourth one and the last tip I'm going to give y'all to make carb cycling successful is, y'all, don't forget as you're carb cycling, as you're moving through it, y'all, don't be so rigid always with it that, listen, if you decide, okay, I've staggered my carb cycling for a month, I'm ready, I'm gonna just sit there and go from my 390, I'm gonna drop to 160 from day 2, 3, 4, and 5 before I get back to my high carb day. Y'all, if that's what you wanna do, y'all, that's okay. There's no problem with that at all. And in fact, I've had a number of clients that once we've kind of started with a month and a half of a stagger, they're seeing progress. We kind of will go ahead and switch to that. Like we'll kind of adjust those down a little bit anyway after maybe week 3. But then once they get to week 5 or week 6, we go ahead and we throw their body for a loop before they kind of stagnate out and plateau out. And then we'll switch over and maybe we'll drop down to that 160 level, 170 level. And then we'll do all of our days of low carbs at that level. Sometimes we've done it where we'll do 3 low carb days at that level. And then day 5, right before we get to their high carb day, we'll drop it down to 100, or I've even had somewhere I've dropped it down to like 70 to have a super huge drop. And that way when they have that high carb day, their body really is like needing, and it's really just dying for all those nutrients, and it helps their muscles to store those up in the right ways, because y'all, they're still going to consume the right kind of foods. But y'all, as you're going through any of those things, y'all, don't be so rigid that, y'all, if you're sitting there and you're starving one day and you're on day 4 and tomorrow's day 5 and that's your last low carb day, and you know, like, hey, I'm supposed to only be at 150 carbs for the day, I'm at 140, and I need to have this little bit of something, and it's going to take me to 155 or 160 for the day. Y'all, get the calories in, get the carbs in. At some point, your body needs that, and maybe you've had some monster workouts. Maybe you've been, at your CrossFit affiliate, you've been doing some workouts outside in the sun, and your body's kind of gotten drained even more from that. Sometimes that happens. Maybe you've been focusing on lifting heavier, doing some more big compound movements. Those all happen. Maybe it was a couple weeks ago and you were doing Murph, and 2 days afterwards you're dying. And you're like, man, I'm just dying. This is horrible. Well, you did Murph 2 days ago. And then yesterday you crushed it. And now your body's suffering because it hasn't gotten those things replenished like it needs. Make sure that you end up, taking those things into account when you're eating your meals, when you're getting your nutrition in. Y'all, I hope those tips help. Y'all, carb cycling can be something that's super, super effective. It can have super amazing benefits. So y'all, don't be afraid to give it a try. If you've tried it before, maybe you haven't had success, maybe you dropped carbs too low and it was miserable and everything. Y'all, if that's the case, that's fine. Y'all, give it another try if you're interested and you're looking to do it. Y'all, I hope those tips help. Y'all, give carb cycling a try. If you're looking to lean out some more, if you're looking to drop some extra body fat, make your workouts easier, maybe you have certain movements, maybe you're having some issues with your joints and you're holding on to a few extra pounds of body fat, y'all give it a shot. So guys, I hope y'all have some great luck with carb cycling. Hopefully these tips help, and I'll see you guys soon.